So the question is to all of the panellists, if you're in government, and Janet, this would be a coalition government of some sort or other, will you use that external affairs power to say no to the Carmichael mine?
I don't think anyone want to hear my answer. Look, we've made it very clear that we're not going to stop the Adani Carmichael mine. It has received state Labor government approvals and now federal approvals. Indeed, Mark used to be the Minister for the Environment. He could have stopped it if he wanted to back then. I just want to make a couple of points because it was raised. Firstly, in Australia, there is a massive transition away from coal. In the last few years, all the new electricity power generation plants in Australia that are connected to the grid have been renewable energy. There hasn't been any new coal-fired power generation in recent years in Australia. So that is occurring here in Australia, and we've got our bipartisan target and a number of other things. When it comes to the export of coal, and I think it's worth pointing out there are two types of coal. There is metallurgical coal and there is thermal coal. So when everyone says they're against coal, are they against metallurgical coal? Because metallurgical coal, 220 tonnes are required of coking coal to actually make a wind turbine. It's used in the making of cars and in planes. And it's actually, we export more coking coal than we do thermal coal. And I'm not sure everyone understands it. Now, when it comes to thermal coal, you've got a situation in India where the Carmichael mine, if it goes ahead, will produce energy for around 100 million Indians. India today has 18% of the world's population, but it only has 6% of the world's energy use. There are some 300 million Indians with little access to electricity or no access to electricity at all. Now, the Indians are quadrupling their investment in renewable energy, but they're actually building 100 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations in their country over coming years. Now, it was said that there's no such thing as clean coal. There is such a thing as cleaner coal. Now, the point about cleaner coal is the Australian coal is lower in sulphur and lower in ash than other countries' coal. It's a fact. Now, around the world, particularly in Asia, they are building what are called Healy coal-fired power energy electricity generation power plants. These are high efficiency, low emission plants which can reduce the carbon footprint by up to 40%. That's where a lot of Australia's coal is going. So if you ask me, will we stop the Adani Carmichael mine going ahead? No, we won't. Will it actually go towards helping meet the energy needs of 100 million Indians? Yes, it will. And is there a transition that is occurring here in Australia away from coal? Yes, there is too.
Well, I mean, I think one of the disagreements I have with Josh is the analysis that this government, including Josh as Resources Minister, makes of the state of the thermal coal market. I don't think the Adani coal mine is a realistic prospect. I don't understand, and I've said this publicly, why the Queensland Government issued the licence that it issued earlier this year when Adani had made it reasonably clear just in February that the state of the thermal coal market was such that this was not a mine that was going to proceed. The state of the thermal coal market is in a steep structural decline. Thermal coal imports from the big countries are all in precipitous decline. In China, which some people, including some people in the Liberal Party, would continue to increase their coal imports as far as the eye could see, are reducing their thermal coal imports. India, which is often held up as the great hope of the thermal coal industry, is reducing their coal imports. America, the other of the big three countries that are responsible for 3/4 of coal consumption, has been reducing its use of coal for the best part of a decade. The Queensland Resources Council says that more than half of the thermal coal mines already operating, already built, already having railway lines connected to them, they're already operating at a loss. This is not something that is going to proceed. The Shenhua mine, the other controversial project in the Liverpool Plains in New South Wales is also unlikely to proceed according to Shenhua because of the state of the coal market. I know Adani has very significant symbolic value in people's minds, and I entirely understand, for the reasons Peter talked about, why that is the case. I have to say, though, that if I'm lucky enough to be the Environment, Climate Change and Energy Minister in the first week of July, the priorities that will come onto my desk are how do we clean up our electricity system? Because while coal is in precipitous decline around the world, it is still king here in Australia. How are we going to deal with the return to broad-scale land clearing in Queensland and imminently in New South Wales, because Mike Baird is tearing up Bob Carr's equivalent of those Queensland reforms? Those are the priorities, among others, including the transport sector, that I think face an Environment and Climate Change Minister in the next several weeks.
The Greens would do everything that we could do to make sure that those coal mines do not go ahead. We cannot afford to have any new coal. And for everything that... Josh does ask me about metallurgical coal. I think there's a lot of research that's being done to be actually enabling us to be making steel without the use of metallurgical coal, or at least to be not having the emissions. So if you've got metallurgical coal being used without having carbon emissions as part of it. But it's an area that needs serious work done on it. I mean, Mark's sounded very positive then about the coal mines not going ahead, but I think Labor need to say, no, there will be no new coal mines. Otherwise, it's, we just cannot afford it. And as for the arguments, Josh, about Indians needing our coal to be lifted out of poverty, this has been debunked very widely. And that the reason that these Indians don't have power at the moment isn't because they haven't got access to Australian coal. That the power that would come from coal-fired power stations burning Australian coal would be too expensive for most of those Indians to be able to afford it. And the answer for India, like it is the answer for the rest of the world, is to be shifting as rapidly as possible out of fossil fuels and to be shifting to 100% renewable energy sources as quickly as possible. In India, we've got the opportunity then to leapfrog the need to have the polluting power stations that we've got in Australia.
Under the circumstances we face, we need a roadmap to 100% clean energy by 2030. So the question then is, which party is prepared to commit to a roadmap of rapid transition of that order, and also, critically importantly, how will they fund it if in the absence of a carbon price?
I'll start. So our Renew Australia is based upon at least 90% renewable energy by 2030 and to get to 100% renewable energy as quickly as possible. And I think once we've got the momentum going of heading towards 90% by 2030, we would find that we'd reach 100% along the way pretty easily. In terms of funding it, it would be a mix of private and public funding, and with funding and in terms of the public funding, actually having funding from our proposed infrastructure bank, which is taking advantage of the current low interest rates and very smart use of government borrowings to be able to actually be investing in the infrastructure that we need. And so it would be government investment in renewable energy infrastructure out of that area of funding. What that would mean is that the financial experts that we have consulted with says that Australia could borrow $75 billion over the next 10 years for investment in new infrastructure assets without reducing our AAA credit rating, and we think that this is the sorts of nation-building projects that we should be investing in.
Well, we've funded our commitment to the 26 to 28% through the various mechanisms I discussed, but the emphasis is on the innovation, and that's why we've got the $1 billion Clean Energy Innovation Fund to help commercialise the new technologies that will get us there, whether it's battery technology, whether it's solar technology and the like. It is, the transition, I just want to underline it, is happening here in Australia. In the last 5 years, 8 out of the 12 most emission-intensive power generation facilities in Australia have closed down. 8 out of the 12 most emission-intensive power stations have closed down here in Australia. So the transition is on. And we believe with the capped emissions reduction fund, as well as with the renewable energy target, as well as with the $10 billion Clean Energy Finance Corporation arena and our innovation fund, we've got the mechanisms that are absolutely in place. And it is incumbent upon me just to emphasise with relation to the CSIRO. Funding is going up. Now, it's going up over $3 billion. It was in the budget for the forward estimates. We have 300 scientists who are focusing on climate, and we are establishing a climate centre in Hobart. So I just wanted to put that in terms of where we are funding the CSIRO.
Well, if the transition's underway in the electricity sector, it's not showing up in the... I haven't finished yet. If the transition's underway, it's not showing up in the carbon pollution data. Hugh Sadler regularly reports on this, and carbon pollution from the electricity sector has increased by over 5% in less than 2 years since the carbon price mechanism was abolished by Tony Abbott. We had a very deep process of consultation with the renewable energy industry, with a number of stakeholders, Solar Citizens, a number of other environment groups, and with the finance sector about what our plan should be beyond 2020. And we took to the national conference last year a 50% renewable energy target. Now, what that means depends really on 50% of what, so what's electricity look like in 2030, but it probably means, at the very least, building 2,000 megawatts of large-scale renewables every year for that decade. Now, that's more than twice as much as we've ever built before in a year. 2013, the boom year, we didn't quite get to 1,000 megawatts. So it's a very substantial build. The thing I think that we know about renewables is that every prediction, every projection that we make about capacity or cost or efficiency undershoots. And, you know, if we'd been able to continue with the 20% RET that we put in place after our election in 2007, without the interruption of Abbott's attack, we would have got to about 29%, we think. We would have overshot it by about 45%. So we think 50% is the right way to go. We haven't decided definitively what mechanism we'd put in place, but I have to say I'm not inclined to extend the existing retailer obligation. It served us well, but I don't think it's the right model for the future. Most other jurisdictions around the world are moving to reverse auction or contract for difference type models that allow you to have a bit more of a say around the diversity of technology, the location, and it also brings price down. And I must say I was very pleased to see that Dan Andrews has indicated the Victorian government support for that sort of a model, following very good work being done in the ACT.
So here's the question. Given that we have something in the vicinity of $6 billion of fossil fuel rebates going to the gas and coal industry, I'm not including agricultural diesel fuel rebates there, will you in government in the next term move to eliminate those subsidies and redistribute them either to renewables or to some other worthy part of the economy?
Mark just said it's an opportunity for a big announcement.
These all work.
He's got a good sense of humour, because I think he's going to say what I say, which is that the diesel fuel rebate, which is what you're alluding to, you're right about what some of the agreements of COP21 around subcritical power plants across the world, that was agreed to, and I think that's a welcome reform. But in terms of the diesel fuel rebate here, it goes across a whole series of sectors. It goes importantly, and by the way, it's a rebate on an input cost. It goes to the agricultural sector. It goes to the gas sector. I mean, when we're talking here about gas, people fail to mention when they're talking about the United Kingdom that they get more than 20% of their electricity from nuclear, but they get more than 30% from gas. And interestingly, gas has half the emissions intensity of coal, but it's still classified as a fossil fuel. So I think we don't want to put at risk the competitiveness of those sectors and the jobs, so we won't be changing the diesel fuel rebate.
Look, we had as I said, we we had a pretty deep process of consultation and reflection on our policies. You do that when you lose government, and you do that when you try on 2 occasions to get up sort of sustainable, credible, long-term climate policy and failed twice. Well, we succeeded the second time, but was abolished pretty quickly. And through all of those consultations, particularly over the course of the summer, where we were finalising our policy, a number of organisations raised the question of fossil fuel subsidies, or particularly the diesel fuel rebate, and they raised it strongly, and they argued the case. At the end of the day, at the end of that process, where we dealt with a very comprehensive climate change policy, in the context of climate change policy, we haven't taken a decision to take to the election a policy to abolish those rebates.
I think it's worth just outlining what we're talking about. What the diesel fuel rebate means is that mining companies, gas companies, Gina Reinhardt's of the world, they only pay 6 cents a litre tax on their diesel, compared with you and I, who pay 39 cents a litre. This adds up to a subsidy to those mining companies and others of around $5 billion every year. The Greens are absolutely adamant that we should be abolishing those subsidies and be putting that $5 billion a year to much better things, much more productive, much more sustainable projects, putting it into the infrastructure, putting it into the renewable energy infrastructure, putting it into public transport projects, and creating lots of jobs and lots of growth. I think particularly in terms of investment in renewables, rather than sort of giving subsidies to fossil fuel companies. I mean, there was some research that was just released yesterday that showed that the Greens' policy of 90% renewables by 2030 would cause a massive increase in jobs. The number of jobs in the renewable sector doubling to 30,000 by 2020, and then increasing by 5,000 the next decade after that. Renewables are jobs rich. Spending money on renewables instead of subsidising the fossil fuel companies is a very positive way for us to be heading, that's both good for our economy as well as being good for our environment.
Thank you.